everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. I've got a couple of small concealed carry guns on the table here. I've got a striker gun, the Glock 43, and I've got a hammer gun, the SIG P938. This one happens to be the Equinox variant, which I don't think they make this particular version, but there's about 12 different varieties of this particular gun, all of them functionally the same. They just have different trim, look, and grips. So both of these guns are meant for the deep conceal, when you've got to hide it and you're going to hide it in clothing or other conditions that are suboptimal for carry, and you need something small. They're both chambered in 9mm, so you get the power of a fairly competent cartridge in a relatively small size. So let me pick these things up, show you that they're unloaded, and talk about them a little bit. So we've got unloaded Glock 43, and we've got an unloaded 938. Now they compete in the same territory, but they do it in vastly different manners. The Glock, as you're well aware, is a striker gun. This functions just like any other Glock, except that it's a single stack, so that it's thin. The factory magazine, it comes with two versions of the factory magazine. Both of them hold 6 rounds. The only difference between them is that one of them has a pinky extender, and one of them's a flush mount. So if you have the flush mount magazine in, you get a 2-finger grip. There's really nowhere for your pinky to go at all. And if you have the pinky extender version in, you actually get almost a 3-finger grip, kind of a 2 3/4 finger grip. I've got average size hands. If you've got large hands, you might end up being, more down like that. The real advantage to that is that you can carry the flush mount magazine, hiding the grip a little bit better, and have this as your backup mag. Now the aftermarket has already picked up on the Glock, and there's an assortment of either internal modification kits for the magazines or aftermarket mags that'll get you 7 or 8 rounds. I think the biggest I've seen so far is 8. If you look at the SIG, it has a flush mount steel magazine. The Glock mags are polymer, and it holds 6 in this mag, and then there's an optional mag that holds 7 with a bit of a pinky extender. And that one, kind of just like the Glock, it gives you that 2 3/4-ish finger grip. So when you put the two of them together, put the correct mag in the gun, it does tend to work a little bit better. And you set the grips side by side, they're fairly similar. And I'll set these up at the end of the video and compare all the dimensions. But you get roughly the same grip options between the two of them. Now, the Glock, I believe, came with 2 mags. The SIG only came with 1. It came with that flush mount steel magazine. And of course, like everything SIG does, they're fairly proud of it, so the magazines for the SIG are a little bit more expensive than the Glock. The classifications that the manufacturers give these are a little different. SIG calls this a micro subcompact, and Glock calls this a subcompact slimline. So basically it's the same thing, it's just what the manufacturer chooses to call it. Dimensionally they're similar. The Glock front to back is 6.26 inches long. The SIG is 5.9 inches long, so it makes the Glock a little bit longer. But the Glock does have a longer barrel, a 3.39 inch barrel instead of a 3-inch barrel. Now the 0.39 inches in velocity and accuracy potential is not going to make a big difference, but they are actually, it's not empty space. There is a little bit longer barrel in the Glock. The Glock is 1.02 inches wide and the SIG is 1.1. Overall, though, if you put them close together and look at them, the slides appear to be a little bit thinner on the SIG, but you've got things sticking out like the grips and the safeties and stuff like that, which adds to the overall width. Again, that 0.08 is probably not going to make a difference in how you can conceal either one of these. The Glock is 4.25 inches tall from top to bottom, and the 938 is 3.9 inches tall. If I get my thumb out of the way, you can see it. And that would be with the flush mount magazine, which actually goes up in there flush. The SIG is a 1911-ish. Now, it's not a true 1911 design, but it's 1911-ish in its behavior. It's a hammer-fired gun. It's a single action only, so that you have to have it cocked, and it's meant to be carried either cocked and locked or empty chamber. There is not a safe way to carry this in a hammer-down loaded chamber scenario. The Glock is a striker gun, so of course you carry this with the round in the chamber. It's just as safe with or without. There's no external safeties. All the safeties are internal and automatic and disengage themselves as you're pulling the trigger. The sights on the two guns are definitely different. The Glock has the classic Glock U-dot sights. Both of them are dovetailed. The rear, on the Glock is dovetailed. The front has a screw that holds it in, so they're easy to change. And the SIG has rear SIG night sights and a front TFO sight. So all three are actually a night sight, but the front one is also a fiber optic tube, and that it amounts for its length, or accounts for its length. The nice thing about these TFOs is they're bright during the day and they're bright at night. It's dovetailed so it can be easily replaced, and the rear sight is dovetailed as well. Now, not all of the 938s come with this sight combination. It depends on which variant you've got, but all of the Glock 43s come with these sights, and they're fairly easy to change if you want night sights or something different. But overall, I find these U-dot sights work equally well as any of the other sights, at least during the day. Weight-wise, these are very similar. The Glock weighs 17.95 ounces, so as close as it doesn't matter to 18, and this weighs 16 ounces. And the funny thing is, when you pick this up, it feels like it's heavier, but it's not. I think it's because it's kind of a solid chunk. It's an alloy frame instead of a polymer frame on the Glock. It's a stainless slide, and the Glock is a steel slide, but it's of course treated with the melanite treatment. And I think the difference in the weight is actually the length of the slide. There's more slide on the Glock, and that adds a couple ounces. Now, in the grand scheme of things, inside the waistband carry, that's not going to make a big difference. In an ankle or pocket carry, it may make a difference. And of course, Glock moved away from the Tenifer in the United States. The Glocks that are made in the United States, they use melanite because the Tenifer process is difficult to do in the United States. So very, very similar overall, but some marked differences between them and the way they function. So let's talk about the triggers. Now, Glock advertises the trigger on the 43 as being 5.5 pounds like all the others. Now, this is one of the very first ones that came out. I got this when they first released it, and the trigger was well over 8 pounds. Put a connector in it, changed the connector out, lowered the weight, and now it comes in right around 6 pounds. So let me show you the trigger on this. It's a ghost edge connector, by the way, that I put in it. So you have the split trigger, and of course you've got a serration. The Glock trigger is curved and serrated. And a little bit of take up and a nice crisp break. Be helpful if I had the magazine out of it. There's the take up on it. It's not quite as short as some of the other Glocks, and then all the way out. And then again back to the break, and we'll do it off the reset. There's the reset, right on the wall, nice crisp break, and back in the action. So it's a typical Glock trigger. Now, I don't know if the current ones that are coming out are actually meeting that 5.5, or if that's just advertising and none of them are. This one definitely was nowhere near 5.5 originally. Now let's move to the trigger on the SIG. Now the trigger on the SIG is coming in right around 6 pounds as well, but it's a different feel. Of course, it's a curved serrated trigger. It doesn't have the little split trigger mechanism. What you get is a very short take up onto a crisp wall and a super short break. Of course, it would work better if the safety was off. Let's do the take up again, right on the wall, and then a short, very, very short break. Cycle it. Nice short reset. You're just a hair off the wall. There's a little bit of take up, and then a short crisp break. It's a 1911-ish feel to it, other than it does kind of, the trigger pivots instead of coming straight back. But one of the things I did find with this is that it's a little bit easier to shoot this thing well, because even though the trigger weights are the same on them, there's a lot less travel on this trigger. And one of the things you're going to find with these guns, I have average size hands, but when I grab this thing, I'm pretty much engulfing it. And even with average size hands, and if you have larger hands, you're going to be kind of doing this to it. So it's a little bit difficult with these guns to pull a longer trigger and not have your hand turn. Even getting your finger on the trigger, got my finger sticking all the way out there to put the tip on it, as opposed to getting it all the way through here, which of course is definitely going to pull it. And the same thing, holds true with the Glock. You've got that same basic issue with getting to the trigger. So both of these guns are a little more work to shoot well than a larger gun, a Glock 17, or one of the full-size SIGs P938, simply because there's less real estate to get a hold of and more potential to turn your hand. So with this particular one, because of that real short trigger, that real short break, it's a little bit easier to stay on target with this. Now, that's not to say that you can't easily shoot the Glock well. I was going after a 100-yard gong with this thing and hitting it quite easily. These little guns can be shot accurately, there's just a little bit more work. From a price standpoint, the Glock can routinely be had in the low $4s, and this particular version of the SIG was right around $750. Now that price will vary on the SIG significantly depending on which version you choose, because there are a bunch of different versions, different grips, different style slides, and that'll run the price either way. But from a cost perspective, there's a big difference between them. Now the Glock, it's a Glock, it's a tool. It's plain, there's nothing on it that isn't have just the purpose of making it work, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but there's nothing pretty about this. Now as far as the SIG goes, it's a tool as well, but it's a really pretty one. There's a lot of detail and sculpting on it. The Equinox is backlit or filled in, and all of the variations of this gun are somehow unique. Even the Nightmare is probably the plainest one where it's all black, and even that one's got some pretty cool grips. So for the difference in price, you're getting a little bit more style and splash. Now, when you're going to stick the thing inside your waistband and pull it out to deal with a bad guy, it really doesn't matter what it looks like. But there is a little bit more style in these hammer-fired guns typically than you're going to find with the striker guns. Now, maintaining and disassembling them is fairly easy on both of them, but it really doesn't get any easier than Glock. You clear it, pull the trigger, back the slide off a little bit, pops apart, and pretty simple, straightforward internals. There's your striker block for the drop safety on the Glock. And one tool can completely disassemble this Glock all to its components and spread them out on the table to do whatever you want to do. The SIG is a little more work to take apart, but not bad. Of course, you clear it, and then you pull it back till the holes align, and then pull the takedown pin out, which is easier to do when you're actually looking at it. Slide it forward, and they come apart. Very simple as well. Now if you wanted to pull this all the way down to its components, it would be a bit more work, but not significantly. Reassembly is relatively easy on this. You just slide it back together. Now you do have to remember to push the ejector out, or push it down to clear to get the slide to come back. And then what you have to do is, if you look here, I'll see if I can line it up, as I move this back and forth, the barrel lug will show, and I have to capture that. And then make sure that this is held up away from the frame, otherwise you'll get what's classically called the idiot scratch in a 1911. Line it up, put it back together. Relatively easy to do, but a few more steps. Now, putting the Glock back together, it's back together. So from a maintenance perspective, a little bit easier with the Glock, but as you saw, this overall wasn't a difficult reassembly either. So whichever one of these you get, you're going to be able to shoot it well, you're going to be able to easily maintain it. It's light and compact, easy to carry, so either one of them is going to serve you well. The biggest thing I think that's going to drive the difference is if you want the smallest possible, lightest one, this is going to be the one, the SIG. If you want something that you don't have to worry about the cocked and locked, that you can just carry it however you want to carry it, then you would be looking at the Glock, because this does, again, operate more like a 1911. Now the safety is easy to operate. It's a little more difficult to turn it on, but it sweeps off very, very easily. So if you're used to safeties, it's not going to get in your way at all. Again, whichever one you pick, it's going to serve you well, and you're going to have made a good choice. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, check us out on Facebook and Patreon, and have a great day. Thank you.